Hey, what's up guys? I'm going to compare the new Fire TV Cube 3rd generation to the Fire TV Cube 2nd generation with the 3rd gen remote because I got this last year to the Fire TV Stick 4K Max. Now right off the bat, all three of these do exactly the same thing. They're all Amazon streaming media players, so they give you access to Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So in terms of capability, they're pretty much identical. Except these two have hands-free Alexa commands, so you can say, Alexa, do this, or Alexa, do that, and it will actually do it. Whereas this one, you have to hold it on the remote. But this one, even this portable one, supports Alexa commands. Now, their biggest differences are specs, and I am going to do a load test and speed test comparison side by side so you guys can see the differences between them. Now, starting off with what comes in the box, you get the new Fire TV Cube. And I'll go over the ports very shortly. Looks a lot nicer than the 2nd generation. You get a 15-watt power adapter. It is 100 to 240 volts. And you get this newer remote with a few extra buttons. You get this right out of the box, same buttons and stuff, much more pointy and sharp and leaves fingerprints and little scratches. You get an Ethernet adapter if you want to hook it up via Ethernet, however it does support Wi-Fi. And you get the same power plug as the new 3rd gen, and you get an IR extender, so if you're hiding this somewhere, you could still control it with the remote, and this is the 3rd generation remote. With the Fire TV Stick 4K Max, this one basically just plugs in, and it's designed to be portable or be hidden away behind the TV, but because this part is wide, they also include this little adapter, which makes it much less wide, much more narrow, and you can easily place it in a lot of places because it's flexible, so I really like that. And you get the same remote as this guy, and you get a power adapter. Takes less power, it is a micro USB connection, and it is 100 to 240 volts. Jumping into specs, we're going to start with the least powerful, which is the 4K Max. Equipped with a quad-core processor, 750 MHz GPU, 2 gigs of RAM, and 8 gigabytes of storage, and the app. So you're not left with much storage on this. If you want to increase your storage, they do sell USB OTG cables, OTG standing for on the go, and you can hook up a flash drive to that, and one of the other cables, you would hook up the power to that, and you can increase the storage, should you choose to. The cool thing about this is it supports Wi-Fi 6, which is fairly fast and fairly new. Bluetooth 5.0, so you can hook up your headphones, for example, and listen to it on your headphones directly from this, or hook up a keyboard or something like that. It does support Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10+, AV1, and some of the other stuff. And 4K 60 frames per second is what you get out of this. We have a hexa-core processor here. It's supposed to be faster than the quad-core. We have an 800 MHz GPU. Storage is now doubled compared to this at 16 gigabytes. And the same type of deal, you can hook up a USB OTG cable to this and expand your storage if that's not enough, which in my case it is. 2 gigs of RAM, Wi-Fi 5, and 100 megabits per second Ethernet cable. However, you do need to use this adapter if you hook it up via Ethernet. Bluetooth 5.0, just like this one, so you could hook up headphones to listen to it, or a keyboard or some other Bluetooth device. You get the same codecs as this one, except it's missing the AV1 codec, and it's 4K 60 frames per second, and you get the hands-free Alexa commands. Now, looking at the ports, again, this is used for the Ethernet or the OTG, and we have the infrared. If you're hiding this away, you hook this up, HDMI output port, and you have the power plug. And again, same type of echo buttons here, so volume down, volume up, action button, and mute button. This is the most powerful of the bunch with a new octa-core processor, supposed to be 20% faster than the 2nd gen. But it has the same storage, same memory, same size, same speed GPU. It's the same Bluetooth 5.0, same codecs, except they added AV1 to this, so the codecs on this and this are basically the same. This one's missing the AV1. 4K 60 frames per second, hands-free Alexa commands. So what's different about this? And the same 100 megabits per second Ethernet cable, however, now you actually have a dedicated port for this where you don't need this adapter, which I much prefer that. Granted, I use Wi-Fi on this because this now has Wi-Fi 6E, so it's the fastest Wi-Fi of the bunch, and I've done a whole bunch of router reviews, so if you guys are checking out Wi-Fi 6E mesh systems, definitely check out my videos. Same style, buttons up on top, just like this guy. And now for the first time ever, we have an HDMI input port aside from the HDMI output port, and both of these are HDMI 2.1. So the reason for this HDMI input port is if you have a cable box, you can actually hook it up to this and you can control it via Alexa commands, assuming it's a compatible device. If you don't have a cable box like me, you can actually hook up a console or something like that. So I actually hooked up my PlayStation 5 because I was like, hey, HDMI 2.1, can it support 4K 120? But if I go to settings in the PlayStation 5, go to screen and video, and I go to video output information, you'll notice that it's actually limited to 4K 60 frames per second under HDR. You can see that the max is 60 Hertz. So even though it's an HDMI 2.1 port, even though I'm actually using HDMI 2.1 cables, and the PS5 can support it, and the TV can support it, I'm limited to 4K 60 frames per second. Granted, most games are limited to 4K 60 frames per second anyways. Now, I don't know if that's a hardware limitation or that's something that they're gonna update for the pass-through to go at 4K 120. But as of now, even with the PlayStation 5, you're capped to 4K 60 frames per second. But aside from all the fancy stuff, it's nice having two ports because let's just say you have one HDMI port left on your TV. If you get this, you can grab whatever device, hook it up to this, and then this can actually go to the output port of your HDMI input on your TV. So essentially you get two ports for the price of one. You get the IR extender port. It does not include the IR extender, but you do get the port if you're hiding it somewhere. Power plug, USB 2.0 slot, so if you want to increase storage, you can do that by plugging in a flash drive directly, which is nice. However, it's not USB 3.0, so don't expect it to be crazy fast. And again, 100 megabits per second Ethernet cable. Now, with all three of these, you can play Luna Gaming, which is Amazon's cloud gaming service. So I got the Luna controller, and I'll also do a test of this. And with the 3rd gen Cube, they added Dolby Matte support on top of all the other stuff. And Dolby Matte is basically a different way of compressing and decompressing sound. So it could go down limited bandwidth. It can even support Dolby Atmos metadata to give you object-based audio, assuming everything supports it. It also supports HDMI input pass-through because of that extra HDMI input port. And finally, a quick glance at the display menu. It supports up to 4K, color depth up to 12 bits. They all support this. And when we do a side-by-side comparison, essentially the 2nd gen Cube has the fewest of all the options, where the 4K Max also has game mode on top of everything the 2nd gen has. And the Cube 3rd gen has everything the 4K Max has, and sleep mode behavior and super resolution. Super resolution is when it upconverts the source if it's lower than your TV's resolution. So in my case, if I have a 4K TV, if I'm looking at a 1080p source, it will try to upconvert that to 4K. Now for the fun stuff, a series of performance tests compared side by side, starting with a restart. This is real time, this is not sped up or anything, so you guys can actually see the difference. Now, generally speaking, the 3rd gen Cube does have a faster processor and has the fastest Wi-Fi speeds. I will do a speed test a little bit later on in the video so you guys can actually see the differences between those. But so what I'm trying to say is the 3rd gen Cube is going to be up a little bit ahead from the other two. Now, this might matter to some and might not matter to others. So here we go. The 3rd gen Cube is already pretty much almost done loading. I mean, not everything is done loading, but as soon as I get down to the bottom of scrolling and I start scrolling up, this thing's already done, where the 2nd gen Cube and the 4K Max are still loading. Now we're going to do some Alexa commands to open up some apps so you guys could see how fast things open. And because I just did a restart, nothing is cached, so it's a full fair comparison. Starting off with Alexa, play Naruto on Netflix. Now the results for this one were a bit harder to distinguish. The 3rd gen Cube is initially up ahead just by a bit, but I mean, they're all very, very, very close to each other. It's almost indistinguishable which one actually starts playing first. Now the next one is I ask Alexa to play Bad Guys on Prime Video. The 3rd gen Cube does load the fastest. It is a clear winner in this case, where the other two are still loading. So here's where I do a fast forward test so you guys could see how fast it loads. Basically, I'm trying to force it to buffer, and while this does depend on your internet speeds, overall this thing is actually pretty quick. And all three of these are on Wi-Fi, and I am using the Orbi RBKE 963, which is an amazing mesh Wi-Fi system. So the second gen cube wasn't as fast, but not terrible. And the 4K Max is right around the same as the second gen cube. Now to open up another app, which takes a bit more time, is Crunchyroll. So I asked him at the same time, and the second gen cube actually won this test just by a little bit. And shortly after, I am going to click the Netflix button on the remote because Netflix is now cached. You guys could see how quick it actually loads, which is very, very quick in this case. And if you guys have any Ring cameras, you can actually ask Alexa to show them on the screen. And in this case, it looks like the third gen cube is winning just by a bit. Second gen cube took second place and the 4K Max came in third place. So a cool feature. Now for the internet speed test, the most distinguishable from all the ones I've done. So all three of these are hooked up via Wi-Fi. So the second gen cube is Wi-Fi 5, the 4K Max is Wi-Fi 6, and the third gen cube is Wi-Fi 6E, all hooked up to the same mesh system, which is the Netgear Orbi RBKE 963. Now your speeds may vary based on your internet speeds and the router you have them connected to. In my case, my internet speeds are actually 940 megabits per second download, and none of these got even close to that. However, between the three, the second gen cube did horrible, and while the 4K Max did fine, and the third gen cube took top place. Now, even if I hooked up the second gen cube via Ethernet, I would still be limited to 100 megabits per second. So in either case, the 4K Max and the third gen cube were faster. Now, the final test is on Luna, which is Amazon's cloud gaming service, which does require a subscription. So in this case, because it is cloud-based, the processor matters less. It's really your internet speeds that matter more. So in my mind, the third gen cube should perform the best. However, in this case, the 4K Max is actually what took first place, as you guys can see while it loads. Now the second gen cube, even though it was much slower in the internet speed test compared to the other two, it's actually not that far behind. So even in this case, there's not a huge difference between the three. And the whole point is, if you're considering getting the third gen cube, while it is faster, things do load faster and the Wi-Fi typically is faster, it's really, I mean, in my mind, it's also because it has an additional HDMI port. It's because it has the hands-free commands, assuming you're coming from the Firestick, not from the other cube. And assuming you're coming from the 4K Max, it also has more storage. Now the 4K Max did win this challenge, but not by much, and the gameplay is fine for all three, so good to go there. And finally, these are some capabilities that the third gen cube has that the other two do not. So if I go here, I can select inputs, go to HDMI, and I'll load up my PlayStation 5, which is already connected through this. Home button, it'll take me back to the home, and I can also click on the settings button shortcut, which will open up these settings right away. And I can click on the recent apps, which will show me everything that was recently opened. Now let's talk about the pros and cons for each. The Firestick 4K Max is super portable, so if you're traveling or taking it with you, or if you just want to hide it behind the TV, it's perfect for that. It also has some pretty fast internet speeds, and loading speeds are also pretty okay. The only thing was the restart test. It was a bit slower compared to the other two when I restarted. But aside from that, honestly, it's fine. The second generation Fire TV Cube is a bit faster processing wise compared to the Fire Stick. However, internet wise, it's a bit slower. Even if I were to hook up Ethernet, it would still be slower in my case. And the third generation Cube is the fastest in terms of processing power and for internet. So either way, you really can't go wrong with the third gen Cube. It also has hands-free capabilities and that extra HDMI input port, and the fact that everything's kind of built in, like the Ethernet port. If you did want to use Ethernet, you didn't need an extra adapter. So all of those are kind of pros for the Fire TV Cube third generation. So best bang for your buck, Fire Stick, and best overall is the Fire TV Cube third generation. So let me know in the comment sections below, which one would you get and why? And as always, smash that subscribe button, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.